We are seeing that couples around the world are marrying interfaith, interculture, and around in different time zones and in different destinations. And so it's really important to understand what this actually means for our businesses. If you are in the wedding industry in 2025, you need to understand culture. Welcome back to the Wedded Business Digest. I'm so excited to speak to you about one of my favorite topics, which is cultural weddings. Now, we started Wedded Wonderland with the idea that every single culture from around the world should be celebrated in media and on platforms and recognized for all of the unique rites of passage that take place within weddings. I worked in the wedding industry before I started Wedded Wonderland, and on 250 weddings with 88 cultures and cross cultures. This is a big passion point of mine. And when I was planning my wedding back in the Stone Age, I would open up wedding magazines and I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And I really wanted that to be celebrated. And that is one of the key drivers of Wedded Wonderland. One of our key pillars, of course, is cultural weddings in the luxury, cultural, and destination wedding market. I'm going to get started by talking about the importance of recognizing what cultural weddings actually mean and differentiating that from religious weddings, because I think there are so many traditions that are cultural and then there are some that are religious. And the religious tend to be non-negotiable. When it comes to cultural and cross-cultural weddings, we need to consider what couples actually want to keep and what they don't really want to proceed with. And of course, how much involvement is there from the family and what say do the parents have and the relatives versus the couple? Now, we're actually finding a bit of a trend, and I don't really like the word trend, but we are finding that couples are actually investing time and energy in understanding the history of weddings within their own families and pulling out some cultures and some traditions that they may not have even been aware of. We're finding this with Italian weddings, with Irish weddings, with German weddings, Middle Eastern weddings, and everywhere in between, where through migration and potentially generations, some traditions were lost and couples are wanting to bring that back into the fold. We love this and we talk about this very often on weddedwonderland.com because this is something that brings people back to their roots and to who they are, where they come from, and of course, celebrating their love story. Now, in saying that, cultural appropriation and how we are actually seeing this play out in the wedding industry is a little bit murky. We are seeing destination weddings take place where there is an adaptation of local customs and culture. The most important thing here is to bring in a local expert who can actually explain what all of this means, because you want to be doing this authentically in your wedding. And as a planner or as a designer, you want to ensure that there is no cultural appropriation without consideration of why we're dressing a certain way or doing a certain thing. I'm going to refer to, for example, the haka, and some people loving that cultural dance and of course the elements within that and thinking, I'd love to do a haka at my wedding. Okay, that sounds wonderful, but is this something that you should be doing? Is this something that is culturally significant to you, or is it just a fun dance? Because for that particular culture, it is so much more significant than just that. Versus, for example, the Lebanese drums, which some people are adapting to their wedding because they're wanting to bring a little bit of flavor. And so from that perspective, that is not considered as significant culturally or cultural appropriation as the haka, for example. So this is why you need people who are of that culture or planners who understand different cultural elements to really say, yes, we can do this, no, we can't do that. And yes, we live in a society which is a little bit woke, right? So we've seen comments of things like people having weddings in Mexico and wearing the sombrero, and people saying that's cultural appropriation, and the local Mexicans saying, we love it. So it comes down to the people and what they have to say. And we want to make sure that our couples are making the right decisions and they are speaking to the people of the land or the experts of these particular cultural traditions and nuances, so they are done in a very respectful manner and in a very exciting manner for their wedding and not taken out of context. We want to ensure that our couples are really well educated within their own culture or the culture in which they're having their destination wedding. So this is another really big talking point. For those who work in the wedding industry, if you want to be working in cultural weddings, you need to be well versed. With Indian weddings, I don't need to say it, there are so many rites of passage. If you don't understand this, you will not get that client. It's as simple as that. The Indian community and the diaspora want to work with people who understand their culture and their customs. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be of that cultural origin. It means that you need to understand how to service this market. I'm speaking particularly to venues as well. So from a venue perspective, what do you provide in catering? Do you service different cultures within your kitchens? Do you actually understand the requirements of a mandap? Yes? Do we know that a fire ceremony needs to take place or a tea ceremony needs to take place? Do you have space for this? Are your packages and your propositions reflective of this? Is this information readily available online? Again, if you are only propositioning yourself and presenting one culture or one custom, that's the only couple that you're going to be attracting. If you want to be presenting yourself to multiple cultures and multiple customs and multiple traditions, you need to be talking about that. You need to be consistent. It needs to be readily found on your website and across your social media channels. And you need to be really clear in terms of what your offering is for this market. Now, our suggestions, of course, when it comes to destination weddings, is finding someone who actually knows the lay of the land and incorporating and respecting the place in which you are choosing your wedding. Considering what flowers are grown, what local artisans are doing, how you can actually tie this into your wedding without having to bring everything in, connecting with local service providers, which is what our Wedded Network is all about, right? Because people move from point A to point B to actually reflect the destination they're having their wedding in. They don't want to copy paste wedding from the location they're in somewhere else, right? So we need to ensure that we understand the cultures in which we're serving and the cultures in which we're working in. And I'm going to give you a prime example of a Lebanese Indian wedding that took place in Bali, right? So you've got a cross culture, many requirements, a negotiation of what should be included in entertainment, in food, in setup, because there are different elements within the wedding that are reflective of each culture. And then of course, you're in Bali as well. So how is that tied in? You need a sophisticated planner on this. You need a photographer who understands what to capture. The last thing you want is a photographer to come in and not know that that is a rite of passage they need to be really honing in on. And whether it's a priest or whether it's somebody from the family that is actually performing a ceremony, for example, where are the elements that are of most importance? And this is again where photographers and cinematographers need to be really well versed. So cultural weddings and embracing culture is something that we are definitely seeing in 2025 and 26. How are you bringing this to your business and how are you driving this forward through your content strategy and through your marketing and through the connections that you actually have? If you are in the wedding industry in 2025, you need to understand culture. I think people are connecting back to tradition because when it comes to a wedding and a celebration, it is a rite of passage, it is emotional, it is connection, and it's about family and about unity. And you want what is special and true to you involved in that. And so people are reflecting back to their grandmother's lace, their grandfather's handkerchief, for example, and incorporating these types of things and wanting to know the meanings behind them. We're seeing Irish rings, engagement rings come back into the fold. We're seeing people propose in traditional settings. All of this is an example and true testament to people really wanting to connect with who they are, where they come from, and ensuring it's a key part of their celebration. We often receive messages from our couples and brides in particular who say, I am of this culture, I am marrying into this culture. More often than not, it is a culture that seems to be strong and powerful, and they want to ensure that they don't do anything that is displeasing. And of course, they want to respect the culture in which they're marrying into. They want information. So we often find this when people are marrying into cultures from South America, from India, and the global South, all the way through to Africa, and of course, China, and Eastern countries such as Russia, Lebanon, and everywhere in between. So really, really important that we also are respecting our couples in understanding that they may not even know. They may have attended weddings and not actually know what some of these ceremonies mean and why they need to or should consider having them in their weddings, and at least giving them the option and explaining the importance of these ceremonies and these rituals and these events, because they are going to hear it from their parents. They're probably going to hear it from friends and family. And really, as the wedding industry, we are the experts. We should know. So when we receive those messages, do I need to have the drums? Do I need to have the entertainment this way? Is this really important? Is this a cultural thing? Is this an entertainment thing? Is this a religious thing? Can somebody please break this down for me? Do I need to have the zorba? Do I need to have the kolo? All of these things matter, and of course, people want to understand what that actually means. Is it for an hour? Is it for 5 hours? Am I waving the Serbian flag the morning of my wedding? What is actually going on? We need to be able to explain this in context in the wedding industry. Well, we are in Australia and in Canada and in the US and in Western countries. Of course, we see a lot of cross-cultural weddings, first, second, and third gen. And so it's really important to be able to identify how to actually service these customers and this market, as well as cultural weddings, as well as cultural destination weddings and cross-cultural destination weddings. They are the 4 key talking points when it comes to culture and weddings, and you need to understand them all in your business. I'm sitting here in Sydney, Australia, and I'm speaking to the global wedding market. And of course, we are seeing that couples around the world are marrying into faith, into culture, and around in different time zones and in different destinations. And so it's really important to understand what this actually means for our businesses. Now, those who are generalists in the wedding industry, I'm talking specifically to you. If you want to target niche cultures and you have an understanding of that, and you have worked in this market before, it is very important that this is part of your marketing, social, and sales strategy. For those who want to tap into these markets, do your research, ask questions, collaborate on a photo shoot, potentially visit venues that are servicing these clients, meet with caterers, meet with priests, really hone in on what that looks like, and guess what? Create content around all of that. Tell people, let them know, I want to be servicing the Indian wedding market in Los Angeles. So I'm going to go and meet with A, B, C, D, E to understand this culture and this market. And if you, my community, have any feedback or any information you can share with me, feel free to pass it on. Any wedding planners who are currently working in this market around the world, I want to connect with you. Be very strategic about your connections. Be very strategic about who you are actually talking to. And if you want to own a market and you want to understand how to service that market, you need to be proactive in actually reaching out, making those connections, and becoming an expert in that field. We obviously have quite a number of blog posts around cultures and customs. We speak about so many different cultures on Wedded Wonderland. One of our top performing articles, I think it's had 500,000 views, is 10 cultural traditions within the Turkish community. And so we know that this is something that couples are searching and seeking. So I do suggest that you jump on weddedwonderland.com. There you go, there's a plug. There is a lot of information on our site in relation to cultural weddings, and we will share this information with you post this session. And it has actually given me food for thought in actually creating potentially ebooks and guides around particular cultures in which we can call upon our experts within the network and actually provide to the industry, because we at Wedded Wonderland are all about curating this information, obviously passing it forward. So plenty of blogs, plenty of information on our site. Within our network, we have people like Vandana Mohan, who is the Queen of India and Indian weddings, both locally and destination, and has been working in the industry for 20 plus years. She will be our go-to for everything relating to Indian weddings. We again have partners within Hong Kong and Singapore who can talk to the Chinese market, of course, partners in the Philippines, all around the world. So we will be calling upon the experts within the wedding industry to continue this conversation because it is ever evolving. And as I said, there's 4 key pillars here. There's local cultural weddings and local cross-cultural weddings, destination cultural weddings and destination cross-cultural weddings. And the 5th one, which I haven't mentioned, which is the diaspora, going back to the land and their origin, the place that they come from, and having a wedding there and having ties to local contacts and connections there to actually bring their wedding to life. We are seeing this, and I said this last week, play out in Nigeria in particular and in India. So this is something that the industry needs to be very mindful of. The incoming influx of weddings and people interested in getting married in your location because that is their country of origin. They may not have the local contacts or the local connections. You need to be found online. You need to be saying and doing the right things to connect with this diaspora. And this is something that we continue to drive through our Wedded network. And of course, we want to share this information with you always. Story time. So I grew up I was born in Lebanon, lived in Saudi Arabia for a little bit, then in New Zealand, then ended up in Sydney. So I have a typical migrant story. And I grew up in Sydney's west, which means that I went to a school that had 70 different cultures and nationalities. And I always say that was really my learning and my foundation and opened me up to the entire world in appreciating different cultures. Before launching Wedded Wonderland, and one of the reasons, as I said earlier, why I launched Wedded Wonderland is because I worked in Western Sydney in weddings. And so I would have couples come in that were having Pakistani weddings and weddings from Sierra Leone and weddings from Ghana and weddings from Afghanistan. Shout out to my Afghani family. You have the most incredible weddings from India, Northern India, Southern India, all of the different local cultures and customs and nuances. You know, people think that a Nigerian wedding is like a wedding from Ethiopia. Absolutely not. And so it's so important that as an industry, we don't refer to, oh, I do African weddings, or I do weddings from, China. Which provinces, which culture, which religious elements? The food and the culture and the cuisine is so important. So you do need to start to actually consider this. We need to think about what it is that we're actually saying and not generalize when it comes to cultural weddings. And this is something that I learned on the ground doing and actually orchestrating 250 weddings. I had to learn about the Chinese tea ceremony taking place on site, Pakistani weddings, and the importance of prayer. All of these things matter, and you need to have the space, and you need to understand the food, and you need to understand the culture. And if you don't connect with this and you're working in this market, you are going to lose out. And let me tell you, these cultures have so much to teach us in the industry as well about celebration. You know, I talk about Nigerian weddings, and whether you're 8 or 80, you're on the dance floor. It's incredible what you learn. Even in gifting, you know, some of these weddings still have the pinning on the Turkish bride, the table at the front where people are actually just providing envelopes. Some of these weddings have guest lists of just families, and it's an open guest list. Some have very closed guest lists and have more boutique style weddings and only have 50 guests because they come from smaller communities. And so for them, it is all about the spiritual component of the wedding. Some have dancing, some don't. Some have entries, some don't. Some have flowers, Sri Lankan weddings. My goodness, I've never seen so many beautiful flowers. And some don't. Some have gifting at weddings, some don't. It's so important that you appreciate this in the wedding market. You know how to service this. You have the contacts and the connections to actually make it happen, to celebrate what it means to work in the cultural wedding market. Recently, we had a bride reach out to us who is from Chicago with an Italian background, and her partner-to-be, or groom-to-be, is Australian, and is half Irish, half Italian, and they are heading over to Italy for their wedding. They're both third generation, right? So this is something that they chose Italy because they have some connection. Neither can really speak Italian, which is interesting, but the appreciation for food, for culture, and of course, the incredible Lake Como is what drew them to have their wedding there. So when we talk about cultural weddings, sometimes the couple don't speak the language. Sometimes it's not the religious elements, for example, they're actually having an outdoor wedding. They're not having a Catholic wedding. So don't, again, make assumptions. This couple are having their wedding in Lake Como because they love Italy, they love their heritage, and there are certain elements that they really want in their wedding, but they don't want it all, and they're looking to have an Italian destination wedding. Yes? And again, when we talk about cultural weddings, how much culture do the couple want infused in their wedding? And if they're going from point A to point B, how much of that do they want reflected in their wedding story? And this does come down to the styling, the design, the entertainment, the cuisine, all of these things that encapsulate what it means to have a cultural destination wedding or local wedding. So there are couples coming from all parts of the world connecting. We're seeing this again in Dubai take place with many expats that live there, and their weddings playing out. It was a Chinese Indian wedding that actually took place just a couple of days ago in Dubai, which was extraordinary. You had the couple dressed in two different outfits, one which was Oriental and of course one which was Indian, and they had actually two ceremonies, and then for the reception the bride went Western and wore a white dress, and it was a party. So again, they may just want that as part of their ceremony. They may have two ceremonies. All of these things matter, and listening out and hearing what your couples have to say and giving them ideas and suggestions is super important. It may not be the entire wedding. When we talk about Ghanaian weddings, they have a cultural wedding, and then they have also a Western wedding. So again, there are changes of outfits, there are changes of days, there are changes of scenarios. So consider all of this when you're working in the cultural market. So please, 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 businesses, don't just share a cultural or a cross-cultural wedding that you've worked on that is absolutely amazing and then mention somewhere in the bottom of the caption, oh, and this was a wedding where the bride was this and or the couple was this and that. I think it's so important that we actually storytell, that we actually talk about why certain decisions were made around the wedding. What did the couple really want? And how did you bring that to life? Whether you're a photographer, whether you're a dress designer, whether you're in venue, what was the brief? What came to you? And then what actually happened? So it's the before and after, and it's the experience. So you wanting to work in this market does not mean that you've shared a carousel from a wedding and you've written right at the bottom that, you know, the bride's from Czechoslovakia and the groom's from Poland and they had a wedding in Dubai. That's not enough. What did you learn about these cultures? What surprised you working on this wedding? What inspired you to continue working in this market? All of these things matter, and it needs to be part of your story, because that's what builds the identity of your brand, your passion, and your business in this market. If you do not storytell in a way that showcases your expertise in the market, your learnings and your passion, you're not going to connect with those couples. And again, culturally, we need to think about where these couples are actually engaging. So we know in China that there are certain platforms that the Chinese use. We know that TikTok, for example, is banned in India. So if you are wanting to attract Indian couples in India and you're thinking that you're going to share TikToks, they may not have access to it. So important. Find your mode of communication and where people are actually connecting with you on that. And it's so important to be consistent with that. You sharing a wedding that you did 6 months ago that was a Pakistani wedding, and you think that that's going to be driving business to you today? Probably not. Yes? This is somewhere lost in your feed. Where is this on your website? How is this mentioned in SEO? Do you have a highlight around this? Be consistent, be clear. If you want more of these weddings, you need to be talking about them more, and you need to be working within the culture. Don't generalize, and don't just give people cookie cut answers. We are in an industry where if you don't understand your clientele and your customer base, you don't understand the persona and the avatar and the people you're looking to attract, you're just speaking to everyone and saying nothing. We need to be strategic. We need to understand. We need to put in the time and effort, and we need to invest in our own businesses and in these communities if we actually want to service them. Generalizing when it comes to cultural weddings in the wedding industry will come at the detriment of you not working in this market. So photographers and videographers, this one is for you. Cinematographers and of course content creators. I'm speaking to anyone who is capturing content at weddings. It is so important that you understand what that journey looks like and what the rites of passage are that need to be captured, and anything that needs to be done pre-wedding, during wedding and post-wedding. We know that with cultural weddings, more often than not, it's not just ceremony and reception. You need to ensure that your proposals, your packages, your content, your social media and your website are reflective of this. Cultural weddings are often grand, they're often lavish, they're often very exciting, and in the wedding industry, they are something that a lot of service providers want to be working on. So my piece of advice here, and to wrap all of this up in a big cultural bow, is understand this market in order to service this market.